Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Best on Wellbeing podcast. My name is Guillaume Tremblay, and this episode today, I want to cover the topic of self compassion. We talk a lot about bringing compassion to the world, that it's good to be compassionate, but in order to be compassionate with others, it's absolutely essential to first be compassionate with ourselves. The other interesting thing to discuss is that we put a lot of emphasis on the idea of self-esteem, and self-esteem certainly can, to have a good self-esteem, to help our children have good self-esteem, can be a good thing for well-being. The difficulty with self-esteem is that even if you generally have good self-esteem, it can also be kind of an unstable thing because much of it depends on external circumstances. It depends on a lot on how other people perceive us. So much of those things are out of our control. A lot of things can happen in our lives. Sometimes for reasons that are out of our control, people might have a negative perception of us, and that can impact self-esteem. Self-esteem is often our perceived value in society. And obviously, we want to bring value to society. That's not a bad thing. But, as a way to support well being, it can have a little bit of a downside. So one day you're feeling good about yourself, you got a compliment from your boss, your self esteem is good, you feel confident in yourself. And the next day, somebody criticized the work you did, and next thing you know, your self-esteem is lower and you're doubting yourself. So it's kind of a bit of a volatile way to approach well-being. And so I'm not trying to dismiss the role of self-esteem. I still think it has a certain role, but I think it's maybe a little overly emphasized in our discussions today. Whereas self-compassion ultimately is an internal process. It's an internal attitude towards ourselves. And so there actually has been some good studies done on this between comparing self-compassion versus self-esteem. And the interesting thing that seems to be emerging from investigating kind of these two approaches is that they both have a nice little upside in terms of supporting well-being. But self-esteem can also have a downside where it can be dependent on, if things go wrong in your life, your self-esteem can take a hit quite a bit, versus self-compassion doesn't really seem to have much of a downside because, again, it's not dependent on external circumstances. So I'm going to put self-esteem. So again, the emphasis here is self-esteem and self-compassion seem to have both the kind of upward kick when they're well practiced, but self-esteem can have the downside, again, because of its dependence on external circumstances. So I just want to go through briefly today the three pillars of self-compassion. This sort of approach to self-compassion has been developed by Dr. Kristen Neff. She's done a lot of great work in terms of bringing in sort of a more clear approach to self-compassion. And so it's basically three pillars here that are how we can view self-compassion. And the first is very simple: kindness and understanding to yourself. Okay. Kindness, basically using a kind voice. Sometimes, the inner critic can be quite harsh. A lot of people criticize themselves quite a bit. And certainly that is not helpful towards well-being. So using just a gentle approach to yourself, a kind voice to yourself, whenever there's something difficult going on in your life, or you're maybe not as happy with yourself. If you found a child alone in the mall and scared scared and looking for their mother that they lost, you're probably not going to be saying, hey, where's your mother, child? How come you lost your mother? This is not appropriate for a child to be by themselves. No, you'll be like, okay, sweetie, don't worry, we'll find your mom. It's okay, and so that kind of voice, that kind of approach, attitude is what you want to use to yourself. Okay, when those moments happen where we get quite unhappy with ourselves or critical with ourselves. So that's the kindness part. Now, self and kindness and understanding. understanding rather than judging yourself, and that's the same thing with judging others, but we'll get to that in another episode. But judgments are usually statements, I didn't do, I shouldn't have done this. I'm no good, or whatever, negative statements. They're statements. Whereas understanding is about posing the question, where does this pattern in my life emerge from? Um, is there a way I could deal with these situations differently? Um, you know, where do those thoughts about myself come from? So when we try to understand ourselves, we come from a questioning, from an inquiry perspective rather than statements. Okay, so a kind voice, and more coming at it from a curiosity of why do we have certain patterns in our lives that bring us suffering. So kindness and understanding. The first pillar is very important. Number two is our shared humanity. Okay, and this is, I think, for me, been very helpful, that when we go through hard times or difficult periods, it's a tendency for many of us to individualize our suffering as though it's unique to us, as though I'm specifically having this hard time. This is if I'm having a difficult time, I feel overwhelmed or whatever. I quickly make it into a Guillaume problem. This is a Guillaume problem. No, it's not. It's a human problem. And whatever problem I've been through, very likely, almost guaranteed, there has been millions and millions of other, middle-aged men like myself who have had the exact same situation and have suffered or had difficulty or challenges or whatever. So remembering that it's not necessarily a you problem, it's a human problem, or I prefer the word challenges over problem. It's a human challenge, not a you challenge. So self-compassion is very important to remember our shared humanity. Okay, whatever we're going through, many other people have gone through, and not to make it overly special that your suffering is just you. No, it's a human thing. It's a human experience. And we got to try our best to relax into it a little bit. And the third pillar, which is awareness towards our negative emotions, to learn to really feel them, to feel the negative emotions and just be with them. Okay, that's probably the hardest pillar. Okay, and we're going to get into a bit more detail in another episode about that. But learning to just not get pulled into the story of our negative feeling in our minds, like because usually our thoughts often feed the negative feeling in our body, the negative emotion, and so self-compassion is learning to just, the third pillar of self-compassion is learning to just feel it fully without adding to the story of it. Okay, so just a little reminder today, let's all practice self-compassion. I think that will help us also be a bit more compassionate to others, which is good for everybody. Kindness and understanding. Let's be gentle and kind in how we interact in our own minds. Okay, gentle voices. Okay, let's pose questions. Let's be curious and inquire into our patterns and not judge ourselves with statements. Let's remember our shared humanity. Okay, let's remember that we are sharing this experience as humans and our suffering is not unique. And third, let us learn to be with the negative emotion, be aware, witness it, just watch it very keenly, just watch it, just hang out with it rather than get sucked into it completely. Okay, so those are the three pillars of self-compassion. Let's all give it a try today when we're a little bit negative with ourselves. Let's be nice to ourselves and let's have a good day. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time.